Let me grab some water before people come in. Uh, so happy MLK Day, Martin Luther King Jr. That's what we're going to talk about, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and whether the holiday's still relevant. Um, do people even um, do any people even know about that man's life and teachings? I think a lot of them don't, to be quite honest. And I I think that there's a lot of black conservatives who are different from the other conservatives in basically disdaining Martin Luther King. Uh, his views were not so simple. Nowadays, everyone tries to put him in one sort of I don't know, someone one category or another. And his looking back at his life, it was a little bit more complicated than simply calling him conservative or liberal or communist or whatever. All of the things that he's been ascribed. Um, Clearly, he had some democratic socialist leanings towards the end of his life, but he also was quite socially conservative. At the, then, I guess in some social gatherings, he may have been quite uh, mm, liberal in a sense. So it depends on how you view him. Whereas nowadays, a lot of people see Malcolm X as a black conservative. He wouldn't have, he himself wouldn't have described himself as a black conservative, but you could see why people would ascribe that to him. But yeah, I don't know if it's so cut and dry, but I would like to get comments from people in the chat room on their views of Martin, of Dr. King. Mm. Would like to get comments from people. Like I said, it's Martin Luther King Day, so maybe some or many of you didn't have to work today, as I assume most of the people watching are American. Usually, the people who, judging by my analytics, usually the people who watch are mostly from America. I get a, I get a few Canadians uh, and a few Brits, but mostly American. Every once in a while, I get someone from overseas. Um, Usually, they're just happy to have a conversation, but they don't really contribute much. But again, you know, the question is whether uh, Martin Luther King Day is still relevant. It's a federal holiday, so it's not going anywhere. But that doesn't mean just because it remains a federal holiday that it will remain, relevant to Black Americans. Because I've already seen, a few Black conservatives basically lamenting Martin Luther King Day, saying that he was a failure, and I'm like, I don't see how he was a failure. That that seems like a stretch to me to say he was a failure. Now, what we can say is that the black community today has failed, but that is a stretch from saying that the black community has failed to saying that Martin Luther King was a failure. Like I don't see how that computes. um, and like I said, there's things you could criticize Martin on. Um, apparently, he was a womanizer. Um, that there were people within his circle uh, who were gay and may have been involved in social gatherings where there was like a little bit of uh, people living somewhat of a bohemian lifestyle, to put it nicely. I don't know. But aside from that, he really wasn't a failure. Like, he oversaw many things, like Ghana receiving its freedom. At the time, it was called the Gold Coast. He was there to oversee the exchange of sovereignty from the the British Empire to the Ghanaian uh, people themselves. Um, he worked as a freedom fighter. Some people say, again, the people who are the naysayers will talk about the stuff that he did as a freedom fighter as basically leading to um, basically like problems in the black community in the future. I don't see that. And also, by the way, if you're in the chat room, you can say something other than hi. Like, I don't get why people do that. It makes me think that you're not even an American, that you just like you can contribute to the conversation in the chat room. You don't just have to say hi. I'm thinking like that's mostly foreign people to just leave a hi in the comments instead of like actually like like a statement of some sort. But yeah, like I said, there was some controversies about Martin. Like I said, you could talk about him smoking, that he once had a gun because he feared for his family's life, that there was you know, one or two gay people within his social circle. Um, then there are some things that are alleged that there's not hard evidence for, that he, you know, there were these allegations that he joined in orgies and stuff like that. Um, that the people that the people within the circle were using drugs and stuff like that. I don't think there's not hard evidence on those claims. Um, as far as the claim that he was a womanizer, possibly, possibly. Also, there is the situation with whom he chose to date. Um, although he married a black woman, he almost married a white woman, a chick, a European chick with who was his girlfriend, and he was persuaded to end their relationship by his father, Martin Luther King Sr., uh, because of the bad optics of him being a a black Southern church leader who would have had a white fiance. Because I think she was uh, half German and something, but she was a white woman. And apparently, like they were engaged at one point, and he called off the engagement. Shout out to MLK and his legacy, and shout out to your family. Thank you, Black Vega. Appreciate it. Um, but yeah, so and for a time he was living in New York, like he with I think with Coretta Scott King. I he intentionally, I think originally he didn't intend on coming back to um what, Georgia or whatever, and you know overseeing the church down there. Originally, I think he intended to have his own church in New York City, um, but then things changed. So you know, then there's a situation where he almost died. He got shot by some fanatic, and I think that's when he started briefly carrying a gun, was after he had got shot. And who could blame him? So what I do hate is that people who don't know anything about Martin Luther King only talk about his "I Have a Dream" speech, which was not his most important speech. On top of that, people don't realize that after that speech, he actually did a I don't know if I want to say wrote an addendum to the speech, but he reflected on it and realized that it it wasn't enough to just talk about having a dream where people will be judged by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. He realized that didn't go far enough. So, um, so there's that. Yeah, I'm purposely not responding to the clown who's asking me, who's saying stupid shit. You're not talking about anything that I'm talking about, which is MLK Day. So I'm ignoring you. Anyway, were you uh were you off work today, Black Vega? Did you have to work? But where was I? So yeah, like I said, he got shot, and he briefly carried a weapon in self defense. Then he realized that wasn't what he wanted to do. Oh, he was. Okay, thanks for asking. No problem. So, um, but yeah, there's a lot of complexity to that man. And like I said, the "I Have a Dream" speech was not, that may be the most well known and prolific speech, but it wasn't his best speech, nor was it the most important. His letter from Birmingham, a letter from a Birmingham jail, is a way more important speech that he gave. Although it wasn't really a speech, it was written because again he was locked up and someone read it out loud for him while he was locked up. That was an important speech. The speech that he gave, like I said, at at the at um, the on the Independence Day of Ghana, was also a very important speech. But I most people, and I don't even fault just conservatives, because it's liberals as well, liberals and progressives as well, who only know the "I Have a Dream" speech. What I do fault conservatives for, particularly black conservatives, is that they only talk about, well, yeah, he was the only thing he was right about was the content of judging people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. Black conservatives annoy the fuck out of me with that bullshit. Like, don't, and when I'm criticizing black conservatives, don't think that I'm a black liberal. I am not. I am not a black liberal, not a black progressive. I used to be progressive as people of my channel know, that 3 years ago I was a progressive, and people would have saw my pivot from black conservative to a classical liberal slash libertarian type person. That's where I am politically. I'm somewhat of a classical liberal slash libertarian. All right. Um, but yeah, black conservatives are annoying as fuck. Like there's some pointy haired idiot who needs a haircut and a mustache trim, Andre Williamson or whatever the fuck his name is, who was talking shit about Martin Luther King. Like, nigga, shut the fuck up. You don't even know about Martin Luther King. And he looks like a fucking coon. Like he looks like the type of black person that other black people make fun of when they think of like the out of touch black conservative who's caping for white people. That's what he looks like. Like if you're gonna be a black conservative, at least be well coiffed like Brandon Tatum. I don't agree with everything Brandon Tatum says, and sometimes it seems like he is caping for white conservatives. But at least he looks well. It look at least his image is well coiffed. Like I can take him seriously because he's articulate. He's not saying nigga this, nigga that, like Andre Williams or Williamson, whatever the fuck his name is. He the nigga needs an image consultant. But he says nigga this, nigga that, like I just did. I did that on purpose, by the way. And uh, he has a fucked up ass lopsided haircut with a fucked up ass mustache. Like, dude, like get a haircut, trim your mustache and beard before you like get that shit. Like I'm rocking a 5 o'clock shadow, but even still, I look more presentable than this guy. Probably because I just look better anyway. but and I'm probably like 10, at least 10 years older than him. But this dude sitting there criticizing Martin Luther King, and he's basically ascribing all the failures of the black community to Martin Luther King. I'm like, how? By and large, the black community doesn't even abide by what Martin Luther King was talking about, for better or for worse. And towards the end of Martin Luther King's life, his career in his I was about to say career, I mean in his pursuits, he had pivoted from just civil rights to economic justice and was advocating for democratic socialism, and that's when he got put down. When he started when he started advocating for economic justice, it was okay for him to talk about civil rights and getting black people on the even kill. That was okay. I mean, it made him hated by the white supremacists and all that people of his time. But what really fired people up, particularly some people in government like Hoover, FBI Director Hoover, and others, was him talking about economic justice. Because then, for him, it sounded like he was pushing communism, and no, we can't have that. I mean, they had already assassinated Medgar Evers, then Malcolm X. So it was a matter of time before they got into Martin Luther King. I mean, they even assassinated one of our own presidents. Now, I'm not I'm not going to go into conspiracy theory because everyone has their own pet theory of of who and why John F. Kennedy Jr. was. I mean, it's not Jr. Sorry, John F. Kennedy Sr. was assassinated. And yes, the null hypothesis is just to say it was a lone gunman who was a crazy ex-marine who was motivated to do this because he was batshit crazy. However, I even read a fucking school history textbook that claimed that the man wasn't working alone. Now, you could say that that was just the opinions of the authors of that history book. Um, but because even with the JFK files that Trump said he was going to release, so much of it has been redacted. I will say this: I can believe that that uh, what was the guy's name? John. I forgot the guy. I forgot the assassin's name. But yes, we can. It is reasonable to assume that he was working alone and he alone decided to unalive JFK. However, to think that there was not people who would have had vested interest in that man dying would be being disingenuous. You had people in the mob who were heavily invested in his death. Again, not to say that they did it, but they would have been invested in it, and they've been claiming for the past 60 years to have to literally have been involved, particularly the not the mob out of New York, the five families, but the mob out of Chicago, which is called the Outfit. I mean, the Outfit is an extension of La Costa Nostra, but the five families is its own thing. You have the five families of New York plus the satellite family in New Jersey, the Cavalcante family, which is loosely what the Sopranos are based off of, the New Jersey family called the Cavalcante family. So you have them there in the tri-state area that pretty much controls most of most of the Northeast. You have the Traficante family in in I guess the Tampa Bay, Miami region, controlling parts of the South. Uh, then you have another family in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is actually the first place the mob first set up in America was in New Orleans, not in New York for a lot of people. They set up shop back in the 1800s in New Orleans. Um, then you have the Chicago Outfit that controls much of the Midwest and parts of Vegas and the West Coast. Um, then you have a family in, I believe, in Toronto, which controls parts of, um, parts of like Canada. Then you have another family out of Boston and one in upstate New York that controls most of the New England area. So yeah. Anyway, all that is to say that yeah, the mob definitely had vested interest in his death, and they've been actually claiming that that they were responsible for the past 60 years. Whether that's true or not is another thing. Obviously, to claim that they did it would be for them to say you don't want to mess with us. That's why they want to claim. That's why they want to claim this assassination as a hit that they pulled because it makes them more it makes them more scary and intimidating to people to say, yeah, we can take out an American president. However, I don't know if that's really the case. Then people say the CIA were involved, um, that the FBI was involved because Hoover didn't like JFK. Particularly, he didn't like his brother Robert either, who was also assassinated when Robert F. Kennedy Sr. ran for office, which is RFK Jr.'s father, the current Secretary of of uh, of Health. His father ran and was assassinated as well. So if 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 RFK Jr. seems a little bit conspiratorial in his thinking. Remember that both his father and uncle were assassinated when they ran. When his uncle was running for his second term in office, and when his father ran for office, and RFK Jr. had significant death threats against him when he ran for office 2 years ago. So, just saying. Um, all of that is to say that even if there was a lone gunman who assassinated Martin Luther King, there were many parties that had vested interest in seeing him unalived. There were people in federal, like there was people in in the intel community, like Hoover's gay ass, cross dressing gay ass. Um, Hoover had Hoover disliked everybody. I mean, the man, look, he didn't just have it out for black people. He had it out for anyone that had left leaning. Um, I mean, yes, Hoover was definitely a racist, but he also hated anyone who had left leaning politics. He hated freaking Charlie Chaplin, who we find out later was of Romani descent, which is gypsies, but they don't like being called gypsies. That's because that's considered a slur. He had a look. He disliked Charlie Chaplin. He disliked Elvis. Yes, Hoover kept a, Hoover kept files against Elvis. Look it up if you don't believe me. And of course, he kept it against all the civil rights leaders: Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Coretta Scott King, um, Betty Shabazz, the Black Panthers, and many other folks. Guess who he didn't really pursue though? The mob. You know why? You know why? Because the mob knew of his cross-dressing gay affairs at some of their events, and they used it as leverage against him. That's why he never really pursued the mob, the people who were actually harming the country at the time. Because before the RICO, you couldn't really touch the mob. I mean, yeah, you could put them away, but if you had a stand-up guy like, hey, we're gonna put you away for 15 years. All right, bet, whatever. The mob's gonna take care of my family. We'll still, as long as my family's still eating, I'm good. I'm not saying nothing. These guys will stand, but once you start giving them, once they start getting hit with the RICO Act in the '80s, uh, they folded like origami. That was after Hoover was gone. Like Hoover was a bitch. Like I said, I don't respect his COINTELPRO tactics. I don't respect what he did to Malcolm X, to Medgar Evers, to Martin Luther King, to what was the co-founder of the Black Panthers? Not Huey Newton, but the other guy openly assassinated him. Like openly assassinated people. Like they were like the feds were doing hits like they were the mob on black people. So to think that there wasn't, to to think that the government was possibly involved in Martin Luther King's assassination, as people allege with JFK and Medgar Evers and the Black Panther leaders, it's not unreasonable. It's not unreasonable. Black Vegas says, "Yeah, I heard some crazy stories about this his assassination." Yeah, um, like I said, that was another thing Trump did. He opened up the files to. He said he was going to open up the files to Malcolm X's assassination, JFK's assassination, Martin Luther King's assassination, and people saw it as just a diversion from the Epstein files. Yeah, but these were questions that people want to know. The irony is that now that is this is 60 years removed, people are saying that these files are no longer important. They were important to the boomer generation, to the Gen Xers. It may not be important to millennials and Gen Z, but fuck millennials and Gen Z, frankly. Like, we want these files open. Just because they are fucking historically illiterate doesn't mean that these aren't important. The whole point of waiting over 60 years to open these files up is was was what is actually happening, to because there would then be apathy about it. So that was the whole reason they did it. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing apathy from young people about who, the assassination um, files with these these leaders, with JFK, with you know Martin Luther King, with Malcolm X. Like, there's apathy, and that was the whole point of holding off, of keeping all that material classified for over half a century, was that once they once they hit that statute of limitations for remaining classified, people wouldn't care anymore. Um, at face value, it was supposed to protect those whom were involved from reprisals, who worked on these investigations, people in the government and public figures or whatever. But at face value, yes, that would be the case. But on a deeper level, it was basically because they realized, once so much time it went by, people wouldn't care anymore, and that's what we're seeing. But unfortunately, there's still many people alive, silent generation, boomer generation, Gen X, who still care about knowing who was involved in the killing of these men. Okay, and it's not unreasonable to assume that that there was similar people involved in all of those deaths. Again, going all the way from Medgar Evers to the Black Panther leaders. Like I said, from Medgar Evers in the beginning to the assassination of the Black Panther leader in the 70s, both the both that first hit and that last hit were just done in the open. It wasn't even disguised. Whereas with Malcolm X and Martin and JFK, it was more subtlety about it. But we still know that there was someone within the federal government involved. When you keep in files on people, you keeping them under investigation by the FBI and sometimes by the CIA, because there were people tracking Malcolm X when he went on his pilgrimage to Mecca back in the early 60s. Like, that wouldn't have been the FBI tracking him while he was in the Middle East and in North and in Africa. That is beyond their jurisdiction. Not that they can't. There are FBI overseas, but that's usually on a limited basis around embassies and stuff like that. You even have, you know, the FBI's the the FBI's special operations team called HRT, the Hostage Rescue uh, team that works overseas. Like, they were the people who, um, long time ago, were involved in stopping the stuff that was going on at the Olympics in Germany. I think I think it was in Germany, but yeah. So yeah, there are FBI overseas, but the people who were following Malcolm X when he went on his Hajj or pilgrimage to Mecca, And then when he met with African leaders and European leaders overseas, that was not the FBI. That was that was probably another agency. And I'm shooting way above my pay grade even talking about this. But I'm gonna bring it back to Malcolm and Martin Luther King Day. And yes, I think MLK Day is still relevant, not just for the great sales that you can get on cars or a new bed, or heaven forbid the what they were doing 2 years ago when they actually had people having MLK Day club club nights, and I thought that would never happen. I thought that was a I thought that was a joke because Aaron Magruder, creator of the Boondocks comic strip, literally had made a cartoon talking about what if MLK never died, and it was showing people his using his life to promote like club events and stuff like that, and he tore him a new asshole. And I thought things would never get that ridiculous where you would literally have people doing promoting club events under MLK Day, and it started, but it happened. I saw that shit like 3 or 4 years ago. I'm like, wow, niggas are really that ignorant. So this is why I clap back at Andre Williams and other so-called black conservatives criticizing Martin Luther King for the problems of the black community today. He had nothing to do with it. And it's like if they knew about Martin Luther King, they would know that he would be as outraged as black conservatives are about the state of the black community. Yes, he may have advocated for democratic socialism in his fight for economic justice. And of course, he also fought for civil rights. He also fought for immigrant rights too. For a lot of people that don't know, he and other civil rights leaders pushed for the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965. Another thing that LBG signed into law, he signed in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was originally advocated by John F. Kennedy, but he was assassinated before he pushed that through. LBJ had to literally um, LBJ was literally strong arming people into people in the Senate to 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 sign um, the legislation for the Civil Rights Act to become law. So you had a guy who was like a uh, just complete like his racism was not LBJ. Lyndon B. Johnson, President Lyndon B. Johnson, was not subtle about his anti-black racism at times. However, despite that, he still pushed through the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and signed it into law. He signed the Immigration Naturalization Act of 1965 into law. Um, he did his new he did his version of the New Deal, which I think actually hurt uh, American society, but that's a different topic. Uh, but to blame it just it doesn't make sense how I'm seeing black conservatives today trying to blame Martin Luther King for the plight of the black community today. He would be an outrage of the state of the black community, seeing that our music is just soft porn, like hip hop music, particularly by all these little female hip hop stars, is just soft porn. Um, that we glorify violence and murder and drug dealing in our music as well as in our culture. Like the Malcolm, both Martin and Malcolm will be appalled. Like to think that Martin had a hand in the current in the current degeneracy of the black community is, it just doesn't make sense. To me, it just sounds like some black conservatives trying to cape for what they think white conservatives want to hear. Meanwhile, most white conservatives embrace Martin because, like I said, he held a lot of socially conservative values that do appeal to conservatives, whether black or white. So it's mostly black conservatives, young black conservatives, not the older ones. Even the older ones, I think, held respect for Martin Luther King, as far as I know. Like my father was a black conservative. I've never heard him trash Martin. What I do know is that he didn't know that much about Martin as much as I do, but he and other people of my father's generation, the boomer generation, I've never heard black conservatives uh of, you know, like Gen X, well no, of boomers trash talk him. Now I've heard people in my generation trash talk him, but that was because a lot of us grew up on 80s and 90s hip hop, where a lot of the hip hop artists of the time embraced Malcolm X. Um, and at the time, so it flipped. So the disdain for Martin has been around for a long time in the black community, but for different reasons. So again, in my generation, the Gen X, older millennial generation, a lot of them disliked Martin because they thought he was an Uncle Tom or that he was soft um, on white supremacy, especially because the hip hop music at the time was more militant and more geared towards uh, the political leanings of people like Malcolm X and the Black Panthers. Now I see the disdain for Martin not because of him allegedly being uh, Uncle Tom or a safe Negro. Now it's because they're saying that they blame him for the degeneracy of the black community. And it's like, well, you can't have it both ways, guys. Like, you can't have Generation X, my generation, and some of the elder millennials trash talking them for being a Uncle Tom Negro, being a house Negro, and all that sort of stuff, and then have the younger generation also hate him, but saying he's the he's the reason that the community is at its lowest state right now because of him and the people who followed him. The people who followed him were a minority of the black community in the 60s. And like I said, it was divisive. He was divisive even then. Like there was not a like he was not the universal civil rights leader at that time. It was in his martyrdom that we kind of that the black community saw him as like their biggest civil rights leader. That was after his death in martyrdom that the black community largely embraced him as the as basically the epitome of the civil rights movement. But during his lifetime, he was divisive and people were divided um, in their sentiments over which was the right path to pursue for civil rights and racial justice. Like I said, you had the people who followed Martin, you had the people who followed Malcolm X, and then that divided between people who followed Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam, and then you had the Black Power people um, as well, who Martin disliked because he thought they were radical and that they were actually doing more harm than good for the civil rights movement. And I agree with him completely on that. I think the Black Power movement never accomplished a single fucking goal, and they're still around today, 70 years later, and they haven't accomplished anything. Now the Black Power movement has devolved into uh, basically blaming black men for marrying out, for marrying outside their race, for leaving the ghetto, as if the ghetto is a great place to stay. once you start making over six figures. No, no. Um, Most people realize they don't want to be Nipsey Hussle still in the hood with niggas that will take your head off, you know, for the right price. No. So the black so the Black Power movement was trash 70 years ago and it's still trash today. So Martin was right to dis, disavow them. Um, I don't know whether Malcolm disavowed the Black Power movement, but like I said, he had his schism with the Nation of Islam. So that, like I said, so there was no there was no one person in control of the whole civil rights movement back in the 60s. And like I said, after both Malcolm and Martin's death, it fractured even more, and that's when the Black Power movement took um, really ramped up in the early 70s, particularly with the Black Panthers and some of the other more radical groups of the time. And they did a disservice to the civil rights movement because the civil rights movement didn't stop again with the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. They, like I said, the three things that Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law because of the civil rights leader again was, you know, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965, as well as some other things. Um, and many of these were spearheaded by the civil rights leaders. And then, like I said, in Martin's last days, he had pivoted from civil rights to economic justice. What's up, Agatha? She said, "Happy MLK Day to you, sir." Thank you. So yeah, I don't take some of these like goofy black conservatives seriously. These young ones, these millennials and Gen Z, sitting there trying to trash Martin and blaming him for the degeneracy of the black community because they are doing that in opposition to him, not because of him. And like I said, most of these little self-appointed black conservative and influencers don't know anything about Martin Luther King. They don't. So fuck Andre Williams and his lopsided hairline needs a fucking shave that goofy ass mustache looking ass nigga. Nigga look like a monkey. And I'm saying nigga a lot because he likes to throw that around all the time on his little Instagram reels. Like every single video is ninja this and ninja that, which is funny at first, but it's like, who are you saying this for? Who is your audience? Like, uh, people people in the alt right no longer need a bunch of buffoons saying the stuff that they want to say themselves. They they have the Fuentes to say it for them. They don't need black people to they don't they don't need black conservatives to basically sound sound off on the stuff that the alt right wants to say. The alt right now has the freedom and capacity to say it themselves, and I don't have nothing against them saying it because I'm a free speech absolutist. I may completely disagree with what you say, but I will still support your right to say it. And because of the fact that people in the alt right and who lean right generally feel um, more free to openly express their um, their thoughts and opinions on many different issues. They really don't need the the Officer Tatum's and the Andre Williams and the Hodge twins and the Candace Owens to say these things for them anymore. They can say it themselves. They don't need these They don't need these coons to say it for them. Just saying. But I don't want to keep here. I don't want to just keep droning on. I would like people to to offer some comments or opinions in the chat room if there's anyone to offer any. I don't want people just coming here to say hi and asking me random questions and telling me that I look like the dude from Breaking Bad, which I know for a fact that if you think I look like the that I if you think I look like Giancarlo Esposito, you are white and you probably have not been around a lot of black people. Because anyone who's been around a lot of black people will not think I look remotely like Giancarlo Esposito, which I don't have a problem with because Giancarlo Esposito was seen as a sex figure throughout most of his acting career. Um, if you've seen him in a lot of these early Spike Lee films, he went from that to playing the like every bad guy in every in like every genre now. He played the bad guy in Breaking Bad, in Marvel, in Star Wars. Uh, shoot, was he in DC? Was he in DC too? He might have been in DC a DC film. Uh, I have to circle back on that one, but he's basically been the bad guy in everything. And like I said, I don't have anything against Giancarlo Esposito. He's an amazing actor. I know women probably would find him attractive, but if you think I look like him, you're fucking retarded. And that's why I ignored that guy who was trying to start a conversation with me earlier. I was like, you fucking retarded. How the fuck you think I look like Giancarlo Esposito? I don't look anything like that man. Other people try to say I look like Don Cheadle. Again, you think I look like Don Cheadle, the guy who plays Rhodey in Iron Man? Again, you just not have seen a lot of black people, and you're fucking retarded. And I'm glad because of the Trump election, I can say that again. That YouTube has been more accommodating in free speech as of late. I haven't done anything today. I just did my normal routine. Got up, you know, around 4 something. Ran, even though I'm dealing with a bad sports injury, and because of the holiday, I couldn't go get seen. It wasn't at the point of going to ER, but I might have to go to ER because my I have a really bad dealing with a really bad sports injury around my pelvic region, which makes it hard to walk and run. Even though I still ran like 8.5 miles today in the ice, and the reason I did that was because of the ice. The ice slowed me down so much. I slowed down to like a freaking crawl. So I'm like, all right, well, if I can't run fast, well, not even run fast. I don't even run fast on my regular 7 mile runs. But if I can't even run at a decent pace, then I'm just going to make it a longer distance. So I ran 8.5 miles this morning instead of 7. Then I cut down my shadow boxing because again I was in too much pain. I was using Tiger Balm and ibuprofen to even do that. So did that and stretched and took a nap and popped another ibuprofen. I haven't done anything today. I mean, there's really nothing to do to. That's the thing with federal holidays that are in remembrance of an American hero. I mean, there's really not much to do unless you use it to go hang out with other people or you go shopping. I don't go shopping because I'm a straight man. I only go shopping when I actually need things, and half the time I do that online through Amazon and eBay. Um, and as far as hanging out, I mean, it was that wasn't really a factor since most, you know, my friends are scattered all over. Um, and no, I am going to get the injury checked out. I couldn't go again. I couldn't make an appointment for today because it's a federal holiday, and I couldn't make one yesterday because it was Sunday. So I'm going to do that first thing tomorrow. But yeah, I wasn't planning on doing anything, and I obviously because of the weather, it was too cold to barbecue. I mean to grill, so couldn't grill. It was 32 degrees outside, but when I went running in the morning, it was 20 degrees, which is why it was so icy and slippery outside that I had to like my run slowed down to a crawl because it was ice everywhere, like the agents in Minnesota. Dan 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 ice. And I yeah, you watch a lot of MLK videos. They very inspiring. Yeah, I've watched so many MLK movies and documentaries. I'm not. The last thing I watched was uh the National Geographic channel had a docu series on both Martin and Malcolm. That was pretty good. That was the last thing I saw. But I've seen so many movies and uh, documentaries about him since the '80s. It's just I'm not interested in them anymore. Like I said, I come from an early generation where there was like something about Martin Luther King every freaking year on TV. So um, I've seen like over five different types of documents, documentaries or movies. Um, so now it's just like Christmas movies. Like after a while, it's like I'm tired of seeing those over and over again. Like I'm not gonna keep watching a Christmas story every Christmas. Like I stopped watching that when I was a teenager. Same thing with the Martin Luther King movies. Like I stopped watching those when I was a teenager because it just, it's just repetitive. And like I said, a lot of them leave out so much stuff. Like at least if I were gonna watch something, it would be something more recent that adds further detail to his life that was left out of those earlier stuff from the '80s and '90s. Like I said, the one by the Nat Geo channel was a really good one where it was um, a combined docu series about both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Um, eh, it was very like I like the people they chose, the actors and all of that they chose. It was pretty good. And the Nat Geo channel has access to like more historical information than some of those earlier movies. There was most they were played more for I think more melodrama. And on top of that, I'm just tired of hearing about the civil rights leaders of the '60s as if because there's still stuff going on today that we need to focus on accomplishing and not just dwelling back on 1964, 1963. There's still more stuff to be done. On top of that, like I said, there's a lot of misinformation about Martin. Like I said, blaming him for the plight of the current plight of the black community is just crazy work. So people blaming him for the degeneracy of the community today when he would be like more, he would be outraged. It's just insane. Like he, he was of the gener he was I believe he was born in the silent generation or the greatest generation. I'm not sure. I forget. But coming from that generation and them being more socially conservative, yeah, he would not condone what's going on today. And it had nothing to do with him working with communists or Jews or gay people. All this dumb stuff I'm hearing from young black conservatives today. I'm like, you guys are like illiterate. Like that's the best way to put it. Like they're fucking illiterate and they're caping for people who don't need to be caped for anymore. Because like I said, the alt right don't need black dudes to cape for them anymore because they can now say those things themselves as they are already doing. And I don't begrudge them that because again, I'm a free speech absolutist, even if I think something people say is completely horrible or or false. Uh, uh, uh. So anyway, yeah. So I'm not gonna spend the day watching documentaries on Malcolm. I mean, sorry, on Martin Luther King. That would be just to put it honestly, Agatha. I would just find that completely boring. Like I'm not gonna spend the day watching uh, documents where I know it's going to just end up leading to him being assassinated and talking about all the stuff I've heard ad nauseum for the past 40 years. Like, mm, I'm good on that. Um, like I said, if there was like some newer information to come out, like if they were to release all the redacted information about him, I mean, like I said, Trump had released the classified documents on the investigation into his assassination, but as well as Malcolm X. But a lot of it still remains redacted. If they were to undo that, that would be fine. Because, like I said, we're talking about over 60 years now. I don't. Why should we be concerned about the the privacy of people from that time? Um, I think I think a lot of the redactions is it redactions or redactment? Whatever. I think it's redaction, redactment, re, whatever. A lot of the redacting, I think, remains because of the of the possible government involvement in these assassinations by people in federal law enforcement. I think that's where there's still a redacting of what happened during these investigations, not because these people still need to we need to protect the identity of these people. Many of them have already passed away, if not most. Most of them have already passed away or elderly, and I think don't those redactions are still there just to protect the involvement of federal law enforcement. Like I said, I'm punching way above my pay grade, but we already know the FBI was involved in investigating all these folks: JFK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Meg Evers, Black Panthers, um, uh, um, communists, um, all this stuff. Uh, we know that even when we know that even when Malcolm X went overseas, he was being followed by people in the American government. So that was an FBI. That means this went beyond the FBI. Um, I can't see who that could have been, CIA or NSA or whomever, but yeah, to think there wasn't government involvement in the assassinations would be disingenuous, even if it was done by someone who wasn't directly involved with the government, as is the case with JFK, the lone gunman. Like I said, yeah, the null hypothesis is that it was a lone gunman, but to think that there was invested interest in his death would be disingenuous. But anyway, um, doesn't look like I'm getting too much other than you, Agatha, of course, which I appreciate. Other than you, I don't see too many people talking, so I'm probably gonna wrap this up in a few minutes. I just wanted to basically say I still think Martin Luther King Day is relevant, not just as a federal holiday so that kids can have a day off and adults can have a day off from work, and for there to be, car, sales at the dealership, or to get your new queen size bed 50% off, which is bullshit anyway because they just mark up the price. They just mark up the sticker price and then they take it, then they bring it back down to the original level with the so-called discount. But whatever, we don't need to talk about the the deceptive practices of marketing right now. But I think it's still relevant because his teachings are still relevant today, and I don't believe that it is because of his teachings that black community is in the state that it is, like some young black conservatives are now claiming. That doesn't even make sense remotely, and shows that they are completely ignorant of everything that he fought for and talked about. I appreciate it. Agnes says I do enjoy your analysis. And like I said, for younger people, yes, I think it might be good to allow them to watch a documentary or a movie about him. However, I wouldn't force them to do so, because if you force them to watch something like that, then it's the best way to make a young person, or any person really, lack lose interest in something is to force them to do it. If you like, if they watch it in school, that's cool because it's an educational tool. And typically in school, yes, they're forced to do stuff that they wouldn't otherwise do. But at home, if you kind of if you force them to watch some 40-year-old movie about Martin Luther King, first it's going to be boring to them because it's an old movie or it's an old documentary. So you're already going to lose their interest on that alone. Just the fact that the movie is going to appear old as hell to them. But also, then you're going to make them lose interest in Martin Luther King as a person and as a civil rights hero as well, because they're not coming into it on their own, of their own volition, and you're forcing them to watch it. Like, who is this old? What is this dude? Like, it. Yeah. What I would do, I would leave information about for the children to look at on their own on that, on a federal holiday. Uh, but I wouldn't force them to look at it, because I think that would backfire. Because yes, they would become knowledgeable of Martin Luther King, but they wouldn't embrace him if they were forced to do so. So, um, yeah, like I said, you can make you can make the information readily available to them, but I wouldn't force the kids into watching it or reading about him rather, unless it's in school. In school, yes, in school they can force. the kids to watch that stuff or to read about him because that's what they do in school. They make you read, they make you learn stuff that you don't want to learn about. It's not up to the kids in school. And you could, yeah, and you could argue, well, at home they ain't got a choice either. In my home, they're gonna learn about him. Yes, yes, yeah, you can do that. My problem is it, it serves two different purposes. In school, there is you know their job is to make the kids know about him, not to make him like him. Whereas at home, I see it. Whereas home, I see it a little bit the opposite. Whereas I'm not trying to make them know about him. I'm trying to get them to like him, but of their own volition. Like I can't force them to like him, but I can leave the door open that they can learn about him on their own and appreciate him. Maybe they won't, but even if they don't, at least there will be their choice, and they will be knowledgeable of him through school, assuming I sent them to a school where they learn about that. But and of course, since my kid will be overseas, uh, so that oh yeah, I didn't even get him. I didn't even touch upon that. So for people who are black expatriates, expats living overseas, you will probably have to be the 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 de facto teacher about um, Black history to your children because obviously the mother won't know unless you have a Black American wife that you brought overseas with you. But if you married a Black woman in another country, who lives who's from another country, or a non-Black woman in another country, of course they won't be knowledgeable of it. So you will have to be the one to give that information to the children. And there are schools overseas for American children to get an American education. There are some in the Philippines, for instance. However, I don't know if the curriculum would include things like Martin Luther King or the civil rights movement. So I would have to be the one to teach the kid about that. So that is different. So if you're an expat, yes, then now you do also have to be the teacher of Black history to your child. So that's a further nuance for for expats and But anyway, other than that, I'm gonna leave it there. MLK Day is still relevant, and an appreciation of his life and what he fought for would show that he is not responsible for the current state of the Black community. Uh, Quite rather the opposite. So there you go. Out. I'm going to go eat. It's getting late. Talk to you later, guys. Take it easy and enjoy your enjoy the rest of the day if you were able to have today off. All right, take care.